The SmartHubs co-appraisal tool supports the decision-making processes concerning the implementation of mobility hubs. For this, stakeholders are involved in the appraisal of different alternatives of mobility hub designs or networks. As a result, the tool visualizes how relevant is each alternative for the stakeholders involved, based on stated criteria as well as their importance. Why are we using the tool? It is crucial to know the objective of the tool. What are we appraising? What are the different alternatives? The SmartHubs co-appraisal tool has been previously used to identify the preferred design for a specific mobility hub, as well as the preferred type of network to implement a group of mobility hubs. Depending on the objective, we will use the multi-actor, multi-criteria analysis, also known as MAMCA, or the stakeholder-based impact scoring, also known as SIS. For further information, you can check the SmartHubs website at www.smarthubmobilityhubs.eu. So, talking about the objective. Well, in our case, we are going to go through the implementation of a mobility hub in Brussels. That's the case that we're going to use for this training. And as we want to identify the best option out of 4, we will use the MAMCA method. This tutorial explains how to do it, guiding you at every step. But first, let's make sure that we all know what a mobility hub is. Definition of mobility hub is that mobility hubs are physical locations where different shared transport options are offered at a dedicated and recognizable location, with public transport offered within walking distance. But now let's get into it. The MAMCA tool can be divided into 6 main steps. The first one, identifying alternatives. The second, identifying the stakeholders. The third one, identifying stakeholders' priorities. The fourth one, weighting the priorities identified. The fifth one, evaluating the impact of solutions. And the last one, the 6th step, is discussing the results and hopefully finding an agreement. To facilitate this activity, a web-based software has been developed by the Mobilized Research Group at the VUB. The software can be accessed on the website www.mamca.eu, and this tutorial will show how to use the software while going through the 6 steps of the MAMCA tool. Step 1. We need to identify alternatives. The possible designs of a mobility hub are identified, and then a do-nothing scenario is also considered. In this regard, a do-nothing scenario is relevant to know if the implementation of one of the alternatives will be better than implementing none. The 4 alternatives that we're considering for the appraisal exercise that we do today are a basic hub, so a type of mobility hub, a green hub, an all-in hub, and a social hub. This is the 4 names of these 4 different designs that we're considering while using the tool. The difference among them, it's a bit explained by the title, but indeed the basic hub has less services added to some shared transport and public transport modes. The green hub has more a place for encounter, has more green elements, vegetation, and is more uses more sustainable materials. The all-in hub has many more facilities, services, bar, personnel, bike repair station, and is constructed with more robust materials, although not that sustainable. And the last one, the social hub, is bigger, it's more focused on creating a public space, enhancing placemaking, and is built with sustainable materials. These 4 alternatives are the result of a co-creation process that we developed in Brussels in the context of the SmartHubs project. To start, when we go to the MAMCA software, we can create our account, or in this case, go to the login and to the project that we're working on. The first step, once the project is created, is to indicate the alternatives. And you can do so by clicking on Create a New Alternative. But as you see here, there's already 4 alternatives: the basic hub, the green hub, the all-in hub, and the social hub, and a baseline, which is the new do-nothing alternative. In step 2, the stakeholder identification, the groups whose opinion should be taken into account are identified and contacted. So those groups are the stakeholders, and we should be able to know the ones that are relevant to conduct our MAMCA exercise. In this case, for mobility hubs and in the context of Brussels, we identified 5 main stakeholder groups: the residents, the local government, the regional government, the public transport operators, and the shared mobility providers. For the second step, you can create a new actor and like this indicate the different stakeholder groups that are participating and involved in the exercise of the tool. For this, you can indicate the group or the stakeholder name. And as you see here, there are already the 5 groups indicated: residents, local government, regional government, public transport operators, and shared mobility providers. The step 3. Each stakeholder indicates their criteria concerning the design of the mobility hub. A criterion is a principle by which the alternatives will be assessed. It indicates what is relevant for each stakeholder. In this step, it's very relevant that facilitators support participants to identify these criteria. Participants must indicate what is important for them concerning this mobility hub, concerning what is being embraced. To indicate the criteria, after having discussed them with the participants, you can directly indicate them in the software separately by stakeholder. As you can see here, we have for the residents, for the local government, for the regional government, for the public transport operators, and for the shared mobility providers. As you see, in these ones, there's no criteria yet created, but in the residents, I already created 4 criteria as an example. So the cost, the safety, the sustainable materials, the increased accessibility. We can do the same for each participant. Let's say cost, and then we can also add a description and even an indicator if we already have it. For those criteria that have several subsections of several elements to measure, you can also create it here. To show, I'm gonna add one random criterion to each stakeholder group. And the last one, so this is random criterion that are not representing the real experience. But like this, you can see the next steps. Step 4. When criteria are identified, participants must indicate which one are more important than others. For this, they can attribute weights. In the software, weights can be attributed by different systems. You can decide the one that works well for you, but one that is quite easy to understand by all participants is from a scale of 0 to 10. So it's important to explain participants that not all criteria can have the highest weighting, because then it means that they are all equally important, but the distribution of weights need to express the different level of relevance for them, and maybe even a ranking of criteria. In the 4th step, weighting the criteria, you also have, you can do this exercise separate per stakeholder group. Here, as I explained, there's different ways of doing it, through pairwise comparison or through a 100-point scale. For instance, we're going to randomly allocate weights to this criteria, so you can see later the result. That's the 4 criteria that I introduced for the residents. For the rest, I only introduced one, as it was better to keep moving forward. And here we can also allocate different weights. So for instance, this in a real case would happen with several criteria, so it would take more time to identify them and also to weight them. Step 5, the evaluation. The MAMCA facilitator looks for indicators to measure the impact of each alternative on the stakeholders' criteria. This can be a lot of work because you need to identify how to measure what is important, what has been stated as relevant by participants. But alternatively, participants can also indicate how they expect that each alternative impacts their criteria. So for this, you can dedicate some time in the workshop for participants to better acknowledge each alternative and assess how do they see that affecting their criteria, if they have the knowledge to do so. What is also sometimes recommended is to involve an expert that has knowledge to assess these different elements. But otherwise, the most rigorous process would be to look for indicators and measure everything when possible. In this step, the impact of the alternatives on the stakeholders' criteria is evaluated and a visual representation of the results is obtained. To conduct the evaluation, we can also indicate to what extent each alternative meets each criteria. For this, you can conduct a SMART evaluation and also indicate from 0 to 10 how it impacts these criteria. And for instance, usually 5 is considered as not negative or positive impact, and over 5 it has a positive impact. Over 5, under 5 can have a negative impact, or you can also decide to assess from 0 to 10 also only as positive impacts. This also depends on you and how you want to facilitate the process. So in this case, we can say also randomly that the 4 alternatives have different impacts on the cost. Baseline has no impact, so we leave it in 5. Concerning safety, all solutions, we could say, this is very random, but just to show you how it works, we could say that improve safety. Concerning sustainable materials, we knew that Basic Hub didn't use a lot of sustainable materials, so maybe it was a bit worse. Green Hub, it did. All-in Hub actually was the worst in terms of materials, and Social Hub also was using a lot of sustainable materials, but not as much as the Green Hub. So we indicate that here. This is not rigorous, but for you to see as an example. And how they increase accessibility. So we can indicate that all increase accessibility, but actually those that have more transport modes and better connected, as is the All-in Hub, and even does do it more. And we have finished weighting the criteria for the residents, the 4 that we introduced. For the rest, we only have 1, so we're going to have to do one criteria per stakeholder group, and concerning the cost, all of them are more costly than doing nothing, and the bigger, the more costly also concerning material. So that's what we introduce. We go to the regional government. Concerning accessibility, we know that all improve accessibility because they add new modes, but the All-in Hub does it even more. Concerning the public transport operators, we look at how deficient they are. This, we don't have the measurements now. It's also going to be a bit randomly allocated. And lastly, the shared mobility providers weight their criteria, which is in this case also a random one, sustainability of materials, sustainable materials. And we can also apply a bit the principles that we applied before. Green Hub and Social Hub are more sustainable. In the step 6, the last step, we obtain the results. The results are shown and discussed with the stakeholders. Depending on the outcome and the will of the stakeholders, a decision can be achieved. In this last step, the visualization has to be shared with the participants who can actually clearly see to what extent each alternative meets their own needs. Through this visualization, sometimes it's very easy to identify an option that it's relevant for everyone. Sometimes it is not so clear, so debate can continue. Or sometimes it might be relevant for several stakeholders, but not for 1 or 2. And then discussions can start on considering a compromise. So here we have the results of the process, which, as I already referred to, is only an example. So it shows a very strange result because, for instance, we have given 4 criteria to residents, while for the rest only 1 to do the exercise faster. Usually we try to keep between 6 and 8 criteria on average per stakeholder group. So it would be more time. And also for measuring them, we didn't have the indicators. So the measurement has been a bit done randomly to show the example. But in this case, whether you have an expert that could do this exercise based on his or her experience, or then indicators should be found and therefore measure. Or the third option is that the participants themselves assess how they think the different options are going to have an impact on themselves, but then the assessment, it's a bit less rigorous or empirical. But here we have the results. It shows, for instance, that for the residents, they are all more or less similar. For the local government, they are all worse than the do nothing, which is the green one, the baseline here. For the regional government, the best one is the all-in hub. For the public transport operators, both the green hub and the basic hub work. And for the shared mobility providers, the green hub also is the best. So we could say that for 3 stakeholders, the green hub would be a good option. While for the local government and regional government, it would be not. And also they don't have an agreement. So this would be necessary to see if they are eager to make a compromise or to rethink or to adapt the alternative of the green hub, which is the one preferred by others, so it also meets their criteria. And with this visualization, it's very easy to enhance debate and move towards advancing on the decision-making process. In the result, we can also see the sensitivity analysis, which is how, concerning the criteria that have been introduced, each alternative performs. And this can be done separately by each stakeholder group. So you see that in most of them, there's only one criteria. Thank you very much. This is one of the 4 tools of the SmartHubs project. For more information about the project and about the tools, you can check the website www.smartmobilityhubs.eu. And also for the tool, which has been developed by the Mobilize Research Group at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels, you can find it online at www.mamca.eu. Thank you very much.